Today, I'll be trying to help you to kind of learn how to kind of act more mindfully in daily life. And we'll be really looking at how to use a particular mindfulness-based approach, acceptance and commitment training to do that. So really what you can expect is training in the scientifically validated 6 core processes of acceptance and commitment training. So there are 6 processes that can actually help us to be more psychologically flexible and create kind of more workable, more meaningful lives for ourselves. I'm noticing that I'm feeling quite anxious right now, and I'm like, thank God this is a mindfulness talk, because we're just able to be mindfully aware of it and just reduce that struggle. So I'll be inviting you to do a lot of experiential exercises. You absolutely don't have to do any of them. I suppose the reason why I'll invite you to do them is because we remember quite little of what we hear and what we see, but we remember about 90% of what we do. So if we have a chance to actually do these things, you have a better chance of being able to kind of apply them later, actually. But actually, the first experiential exercise that I'd like to invite you to do is an exercise kind of around have-tos. Would you be willing to do that with me? Yep. Okay. So if you want to get comfortable in a mindfulness posture, so sitting with your legs uncrossed, feet against the ground, either closing over your eyes or fixing your gaze at a fixed point on the floor at your knees. And I'm going to invite you to connect with something that you naturally enjoy doing. It can be having a chat with a dear friend, having a cup of coffee or a piece of chocolate. It might be even something that happened a long time ago. I'm just going to invite you to connect to something that you naturally enjoy doing. And next thing, I want to invite you to imagine that somebody stands over you and they tell you that you have to do that. So it's the exact same thing, but now you have to do it. And just notice what happens in your body. For me, I always feel it in my chest and my shoulders. And just noticing, do you feel like you want to do that thing more or less now? And when you're ready, just opening over your eyes. So as Frank was saying, we're going to take questions at the end, and just to kind of protect confidentiality, I might just ask you sometimes in terms of interaction, just to kind of get a rough show of hands. How many people besides me had a really physical sensation when you were told you had to do it? Okay, about half the people. It's usually about 80 or 90%. You guys don't need this mindfulness malarkey at all. You can take off early. How many of you felt like you wanted to do it less once the have to was involved? Okay, that's most of us, right? Okay, so this is going to be the opposite of a have-to workshop, because I think, often people come up to us and they tell us that they know exactly what we need to do, what we have to do to make changes. Has that happened to anybody else? And often, if it was that easy, we'd be doing it already. So this is the opposite of a have-to lecture. You can totally just sit here, listen to everything I say, and not participate in anything at all. And you can look back at the video later and decide if you want to do it in the comfort of your own home. Or if you want, you can kind of get a chance to kind of experience these things firsthand. But I'm just really, I suppose, presenting you with the opportunities that people have found kind of helpful in the past. So I'm a big believer in keeping things practical. I've been to many talks and I go out of them and I say, that sounds fantastic, but how the hell do you do it? Has anybody had that experience? Yeah. So I'll be trying to really kind of keep it practical. Practical strategies to manage your thoughts and emotions more effectively, and practical strategies to really kind of stay in the here and now more. And just really how to apply this to kind of getting unstuck. I think all of us kind of get stuck in our lives from time to time, and really what this is all about is how can we kind of get unstuck and get moving. So, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's, there are few. So I'm seeing a very full room, which I'm both really delighted to see and also slightly anxious about. And with everybody in this room, people come with a wealth of experience, a wealth of expertise, I don't see any newborn babies in here, so everybody comes here with a wealth of experience. And you very likely came to other talks with Aware, talked to other professionals and got loads of kind of ideas around things. And you might kind of feel you already know what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And I'd just like to invite you to kind of really approach today with a beginner's mind. And if you're willing, just listen to what I have to say for the next hour. And you can go out afterwards and you can say, you know what, that Ashley one talked a whole heap of codswallop if you want. That's fine. But I'm just going to invite you just to approach this with a beginner's mind and just see, maybe, just maybe, there'll be something that you can kind of take out from this. So I'll just kind of paraphrase this, and I'll make the slides available afterwards if anybody wants to use them. But this person was talking about how they really got sick of being an expert. You know, they were an expert and all of this, and they decided that they actually really wanted to be a beginner again. So they decided to take up kite surfing. And she says here, then I crashed down into the sea. Next moment I was being dragged backwards underwater at high speed like an out-of-control torpedo. Finally I managed to come up for air. Rather alarming, but on the whole great fun. I don't know that would be the words that I would use to describe it, but there you go. So just, I'm not going to be torpedoing anything at you, I promise. But just giving yourself a chance just to kind of bring that beginner's mind approach to what we do here together over the next hour. So there are 7 steps to the beginner's mind. The first one, and this is one of my favorite quotes by Lao Tzu, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Usually if we take an honest look at our lives, we'll see many, many things that we want to change, many things that we want to be different. Sometimes we'll say that actually what we want is the polar extreme of what we have in our lives. And I suppose it's important to remember that the journey of 1,000 miles does start with a single step. So how can we kind of break this down and find somewhere where we can actually start right now? Appreciate mistakes, they are priceless. Have you ever heard the saying, the man who made no mistakes made nothing? Yeah. So they've actually done a lot of research on this, and they've kind of looked at, I suppose, people who we would consider quote-unquote successful. And do you think people who are quote-unquote successful usually make more or less mistakes than other people? More. Considerably more as well. But it's just about learning again and again and again. I actually heard, do you know of, KFC, the fast food restaurant? Yeah. Do any of you know how that kind of came into existence? Okay, it was actually this colonel, he was retired, and he just had this business that just kind of kept him ticking over. And he was in his retirement, kind of planning on kind of slowing things down, and then they basically they had a motorway that bypassed his little chicken stand. So then he didn't actually have enough money to do him in his retirement. But everyone always said to him, we really love your Kentucky Fried Chicken. So he went and he tried to sell the recipe. No joy, no joy, no joy. Guess how many times he had to try and sell it? 50? More?
20.
More? More than that? 200? More than that? Did I hear 5,000? A bit less than that. I think it was 1,006. It was certainly over 1,000. So appreciate the value in mistakes. They are priceless. And that piece about coming back. Who here besides me has made mistakes and let people that they know and love down? Yeah. It's usually a unanimous piece. And the other people will get them checked for delusional disorder on the way out. But do we learn from those mistakes, or do they keep happening again and again and again? Act without needing to know the outcome. Who here has said something like, I'll do that when I've got more confidence. I'll do that when I know I'll be able to do it. What happens? Nothing, usually, right? Live our lives in the waiting room. Let go of shoulds. I should be this, I shouldn't be that. Really, is it about what people think we should be, or is it about what we actually want to be for ourselves? Listen to what the world is teaching you. So there's a saying in mindfulness about letting every moment become your teacher. So sometimes if we listen to our mind will try and kind of keep us safe, keep us in our comfort zone, keep us doing what we've always did. But if we give ourselves just a chance to actually try out new things, I'm not talking about blowing all your credit cards, trying the new things, but just trying little different things and then actually letting the world tell you whether that's a good thing for you or not, So rather than kind of saying, okay, I won't try that class because maybe I won't fit in or maybe I won't be good enough, try it out and then just let the world kind of show you. Let go of being an expert. None of us can be perfect at everything, and just be curious. So I'll invite you to kind of put these 7 steps into place. So acceptance and commitment training, what is it? I think of it a little bit like this. Do you see in the picture the way that there's two different roads? So one road I would see as being the automatic autopilot. So autopilot is doing the things the way that we've always done them, again and again and again. When something happens that we don't like, the way that we just automatically react. And of course, the way we automatically react is we say, oh, these things happen to everybody. The reaction I'm having is totally normal and natural, and this is just a normal piece of human life. That's what we all say, don't we? No. We say, why is this happening to me? Why is it happening again? This is just the same old story again and again and again. For some of us, the automatic is isolating. For others, it's lashing out at others. So we all have an automatic pattern, me included. There's a reason why I came into mindfulness. We usually only come to acceptance when nothing else works. We're usually nicer people to be around for other people as well. So we all have an autopilot, I'm not going to ask you to disclose those to anybody here, but just recognizing what is our automatic reaction when things happen in our lives that we don't want. And then there's another road that doesn't come automatically for most of us. And this is the road of act. So the first word there is accept. And I think it's really important to say, what do we mean by accept here? When I used to think of accept before, I used to think it was just kind of putting up with, or it's just kind of like, this is as good as it gets. I used to even find myself saying things like, in this exact tone, I guess I'll just have to accept it then. Anyone else said that? Does that sound much like acceptance to you? My Cork accent comes out when I get angry. Can you hear that? So I think it's important to look at what is the opposite of acceptance. And from an act perspective, it's avoidance. So I'm going to invite you just to put your hands in front of you for a moment and imagine that it's something that you're struggling with and you don't want to have. And then just try and avoid it. Try and push it away. And just notice if you're not doing it, what are you trying to avoid by not doing it? Okay, what's happening? Is it going anywhere? And what happens to your time and energy? Wasted, yeah. So I firmly believe that if it was a choice about we either choose to feel kind of sad or anxious, I don't think anybody would choose to feel those things. But there are certain circumstances in which sadness and anxiety are the most natural things that will show up for us. So if avoiding them doesn't work, and if avoiding them actually sometimes makes the pattern worse, might it be better to learn a new skill? So the skill of acceptance is around learning self-kindness, learning self-compassion. How many of us treat ourselves the way that we would treat a friend when we feel down or when we feel anxious? Anybody? No, not a single hand in the house. Yeah. Oh, sorry, there is one hand. You've obviously been before. For most of us, it isn't the automatic piece, though. So you can come to this gentleman down the front later on. So acceptance is about learning the self-kindness, self-compassion. The next step is around connecting. And in ACT, it's around connecting with two things. One is connecting to the here and now, to the present moment. Our mind is very skilled at going into the past, going over past regrets, or else going back to the past saying, I really wish it was just like it was then. If only it went back to the way it was then my life would be perfect. Then everything would be fine. Or the other thing we do is we go into the future. What if this? What if that? If such and such happened, then X, Y, or Z. So the first thing is about connecting with the here and now. And the next thing is about connecting to our values, to connecting to what matters. So what is it that I actually want to stand for at this moment? What is it that's important to me? And then the last part is about taking action. But it's not just about taking any action. It's about taking action that's meaningful for us in our lives. Taking action that brings us closer towards who we want to be and where we want to be, rather than the action or inaction that actually leads to us feeling like we're stuck or like we're moving in the wrong direction. So that's kind of the other road. It doesn't mean we'll always take it, and I'm not trying to say it's the only road, but most of us know the automatic one well enough, so I probably don't need to train anybody else in that. But I'll just be showing you about an alternative tonight, and you can kind of see how much or little you'd like to apply that in your life. Okay. So this is just quickly just to look at, I suppose, ACT is one of what we call kind of evidence-based therapeutic approaches. There was very little research done before on mindfulness and ACT before 1990, and this just shows up to 2009. I actually couldn't find a slide that would show up to 2012, but there's been an enormous amount of research just in the last 3 years again. And this is the same with ACT. So these are the kind of various different things that ACT can be shown as helpful for. It's considered an evidence-based therapeutic approach by the American Psychological Association with moderate to strong effect sizes for for numerous things such as chronic pain, depression, and different forms of anxiety. So this is just to kind of give you a little overview. So what's ACT all about? To hold lightly our own stories of what is possible. Most of us, whether we're aware of it or not, have a lot of stories about the kind of person we are. I am this person, I'm not that kind of person. Those kind of things wouldn't happen for me. I wouldn't be able to do that. Can you recognize some of those? How we say them and we go, oh, well, that would be fine for them, but not for me. So can we learn to kind of hold those stories about what we think is possible or impossible for us a little bit more lightly? To empower us to live lives that are values-based or values-guided, that are personally meaningful even in the presence of pain. It's relatively easy to live by our values when there isn't pain around, but I'm reckoning every single one of us in this room has had enough birthdays that we know what pain looks like and feels like. And that's when it's really, really important, is how can I live by my values even then? And to gently and compassionately turn back to that life when we notice that we've turned away from it. If there's one thing that I can guarantee you is that every single one of us in this room, if we go out of here with the best of intentions, we will go off track. It's kind of part of being human. So it isn't actually about not going off track, but it's about recognizing when we go back off track and can we kind of gently come back as soon as possible. So at the heart of ACT is this kind of notion about psychological flexibility. So we've known a long time that we want kind of what we need to do for physical flexibility. Can people just kind of try, what kind of things do you need to do if you want to be more physically flexible? Walk, exercise, yoga, diet, Pilates, all of these kinds of things. So there's actually a number of things that we can do to be more psychologically flexible as well, and that's what this talk is going to be all about. Being psychologically flexible does not mean that we never feel sad, we never feel anxious, we never feel disappointed. If I find that approach, though, I promise I'll come back and I'll talk to you about that next year. But in the meantime, this works pretty well. And what being psychologically flexible means that no matter what life throws at us, we're able to kind of come back to our values. And rather than let kind of the situation kind of push us around, we kind of come back to that thing that's core and central within us to kind of guide our actions. So I'm just going to invite you now to do a centering exercise. I promise I won't get anybody to come over you and say have to this time. So it'll just be a little mindfulness exercise for 2-3 minutes just to kind of help you connect to what it is, from what you've heard so far, what it is that you'd like to get out of this talk. So I'll invite you just to sit with your legs uncrossed, feet against the ground, closing over your eyes, or fixing your gaze at a fixed point on the floor or at your knees. And as you do this, just noticing your feet. See if you can notice where your feet touch the ground or your shoes. See if you can notice any sensations or lack of sensations in your feet. And next, noticing your arms. See if you can notice which of your arms is a little bit more tense and which one is a little bit more relaxed. And there isn't a right or a wrong answer here. This is just really to help you to connect with where you are right here and right now. And now, bring your attention to your lungs. Noticing how your lungs expand with each in-breath as a new beginning, and contract with each out-breath as a complete letting go. Noticing when your mind chimes in with judgments. Maybe saying things like, you're not breathing right, you don't breathe deeply enough. And recognizing that from a mindfulness perspective, the very fact that you're alive shows that you're able to breathe just fine. So you don't need to change or manipulate your breathing in any way. And as you continue to connect to your breath, see if you can connect also to the reason why you're here tonight. Something about this concept of acting mindfully in daily life appealed to you. So if you were able to get something meaningful out of this evening that you could really put into place in your life, what would that be? Is it that you want to manage your thoughts and emotions more effectively, Do you want to connect more to your values or to the here and now? Is it that you want to react differently to situations? And just see if you can allow that to be the foundation from which we work together for the rest of the evening. And now gently expanding your awareness around your breath to also include a sense of the body as a whole. Almost like you're breathing into every cell in your body. And in a couple of moments, when you hear the sound of the bell, just taking a gentle stretch or whatever feels right for you. I always need a stretch, even if nobody else does. Okay.
Can we do that again?
We'll have more of them. Don't you worry. Okay, that's good. I'm on the right track. So I won't ask people because I want to really kind of respect your confidentiality, and we still have a lot to get through, and we're about halfway through the talk now. But just seeing if you can allow that's kind of about getting in contact with our values, because there's some reason why you took an hour and a half out of your Wednesday evening to be here. Maybe it's for yourself, maybe it's around your relationships, maybe it's to kind of help somebody that you know. Maybe it's that you just kind of want to make some changes, or you just want to do something differently. And just see if you can kind of let that be the foundation from which, over the next half hour or so, just to kind of come back to that. Because there will be times when you're going to be thinking about shopping lists, and you're going to be thinking about what you're doing later, what you're doing tomorrow. And some people will say, oh, this talk wasn't as good as the last talk, or like our mind is constantly comparing, I'm sure if I was at the last talk, I might think that too, but our mind is constantly comparing. So just see if you can notice that and just kind of come back if there's something important enough for you to be here this evening. So all of us will be visited by pain in our lives. There is a difference, though, between pain and suffering. Okay, I'm going to tell you a little story about this dog, Max, okay? So one morning, Max's owners just kind of left him out in the morning just to kind of go off, do his business, all the rest of it. But they were in a real rush to go to work that day, so they completely forgot to let him in. And look at the weather that poor Max got, okay? So Max is out there all day waiting for his owners to come back. When they come back in the evening and they let him into the house again, what do you think Max does? Shakes, wags his tail, sees if he can find a fire. Is he happy to see his owners or not? Yeah, okay. Now imagine you were Max. Do you get where I'm going with this? Would you shake about? Would you give a person a hug, say, I'm so glad you're back now? No. And what would happen every fight that you had with that person for the rest of the time that you're in contact? Do you remember that time where you left me outside? When will you leave me outside again? So this mind that we have inside in our head is amazing. It's why we're able to do this crazy stuff like having a mic that you can run around the place with, having these buildings, being able to build planes, being able to travel. Our friend Max couldn't do that, Dogs are great, but they wouldn't be able to kind of sort out all those things. But also this very same mind that has created so much wonderful things for us also can be the master of a lot of destruction, can't it? It's constantly comparing, it's constantly judging, So just kind of, the next time that you notice you're kind of going off on a rant, you say, would Max do this? So what is at the heart of this suffering? At the heart of ACT is another theory, relational frame theory, and I suppose the idea is that words make feared futures feel real and our past live in the present. So if I say, don't go outside, if you go outside there's going to be a bear or something outside, right? Now, you probably know because of the context that I'm saying this that there isn't really a bear. But somebody said to you there's a bear outside, you might actually have that reaction as if there's a real bear. Has anybody ever been mean enough to put one of those fake spiders in front of you, and it just has all of those same things, So there really is a power in words. And as humans, we can be in something that feels really, really lovely, And then it just takes a word or it just takes a memory, and then we're transported somewhere else. So it's kind of like if you've ever been listening to a song and one minute you're enjoying it and the next minute you think about somebody who's no longer in your life for one reason or another, you know? A song can totally change your mood. And sometimes it has the opposite effect. Sometimes it really uplifts us. But we're constantly kind of time traveling, or we're constantly kind of bringing back stuff that isn't around us right now. So psychological flexibility. Has anybody ever felt like this? So this is the opposite of psychological flexibility. It's kind of when we feel like our life has gotten really, really small. And it feels like we only have a very limited amount of things that we do. And I think if most of us are honest, all of us kind of, or the vast majority of us, know what it feels like to be there. So the goal of ACT, a lot of other kind of therapeutic approaches aim to kind of reduce suffering, but kind of keep our life kind of much the same. The goal of ACT actually is to make our life much bigger, much brighter. If we have a piano and we're only ever playing these like couple of keys in the middle, that's all that we'll ever know. Now we might like go up to the other side and we might actually realize, you know what, I actually don't like it when it's that high pitch, or I actually don't like it when it's that low, but at least we have those options. So the whole ACT approach is about kind of learning to kind of stretch ourselves and try out different things, and then letting the kind of world decide, or letting our experience decide what is best for us. So really asking us to kind of be open, to get centered, and to engage. So psychological flexibility is really about contacting the present moment, so being in the here and now, and contacting that fully and without defense. I don't know if any of you have ever seen that picture. It says, you know, I want to be mindful, just not in this moment, in a prettier moment, you know. It's like when you're waiting at the back of the line, you're like, I just want to be mindful, but just not now, you know. We can't really choose when we are mindful and when we're not, you know. So are we willing to contact the present moment fully and without defense, really as a conscious human being, rather than kind of feeling like everything is just happening to us? Are we kind of taking some choice back for ourselves? And then based on what the situation affords, either persisting or changing in our behavior in the service of chosen values. So rather than letting it be like, oh, I'm just going to stop this now because it's too hard, we're saying, okay, I'm going to stop this now because actually, you know what, that's the more kind and compassionate thing to do for myself. Or we might say, you know what, this is hard, but this is worth it right now. So rather than it just being kind of an automatic thing that we do without even thinking about it, we're just kind of trying to be a little bit more conscious around it. Okay. So these are the 6 core processes that all together lead to psychological flexibility. The first one is around connection. So be here now. So even when you're in this talk, are you really kind of here listening to what I'm saying? Or are you kind of already thinking about what's coming next or what's just gone by? Expansion, opening up. If you notice that you're feeling anxious, are you kind of avoiding it? And here's the thing, when we're avoiding anxiety, we're pushing it away. Who are we really pushing against? Ourselves, yeah. Unless you know something about anxiety that I don't, but it's always inside here. So we're actually usually pushing against ourselves. So are we opening up to ourselves, being kind and compassionate, or are we kind of just pushing against ourselves? The next one is around diffusion, so watching your thinking. So learning to unhook from thoughts, rather than kind of seeing thoughts as absolute truths. And we can actually do, I promise this won't hurt as much as the avoidance one. Would you be willing to put your hands in front of you again? And imagine this time that it's a thought you get really hooked by. Could be, I'm not good enough, or this isn't working. And then just slowly just taking your hands up and up and up until they actually cover your face. And then just trying to have a look around the room. What's the view of the room like now? Yeah. Strained at best. And then we can just gently bring it back down. And you guys are a really nice crowd. I've actually had groups in this very room where I take my hands down and I just realize everyone else is looking at me, looking around the room like that. And I was like, that was really not the point of this exercise. So when we're like this with our thoughts, that's what we call cognitive fusion. So it's like we're fused with our thoughts. It's like us and our thoughts are the same thing, and we can't tell the wood from the trees. So diffusion is learning to unhook from our thoughts. Not that we don't have them anymore, but they don't have quite as much power over us. Then there's a piece around the observing self. So we talk about the thinking self. We sometimes give our mind a name in ACT. I call my mind yakety yak, because it's yakety yakking on. I have a close friend who I work with who calls hers Mary Poppins, because it pops in with stuff that's not helpful. Another person calls them TAs because their mind's going like that. So I'm not going to be asking everybody, what have you called your mind when you're walking out? But sometimes it can be helpful, and I just go, oh, there's yakety yak again, you know. Because other times we actually just take our mind and us to be the one and the same thing. So the observing self is more about pure awareness. It's kind of about being able to see the bigger picture, being able to see things from different perspectives. And then always it's in the service of value, so knowing what matters. What matters to me at the end of the day? And we will be doing some of those exercises near the end. And committed action, so doing what it takes. Okay. So the ACT question is this. Okay, good. Given a distinction between you and the stuff you are struggling with and trying to change. So that might be giving a distinction between you and your depression or your anxiety. So given a distinction between you and the stuff that you are trying to change, are you willing to have that stuff fully and without defense? As it is and not what it says it is. You know, often our mind says things to us like, you won't be able to cope. You know, it kind of adds layers and layers and layers. So as it is and not as it says it is. And do what takes you in the direction of your chosen values at this time in this situation. So it's basically saying, in this moment, is your mind in charge or is your heart? And if the answer is yes, that's psychological flexibility. Has anybody ever felt like this, that everybody else seems to be happy and everybody else seems to know the secret and you're the only one who doesn't know it? Yeah. And what do you do when you get caught up with that? Most of us, we kind of start isolating, or we stop telling people about how we're really feeling because we think they won't get it or they won't understand. Is happiness normal? The reality is happiness is as normal as it is abnormal, just like sadness. You know, there are certain contexts in which, you know, if I had, let's say, a loss in my family, and if I went up to a friend and I said, you know, I'm really sad, like I've lost this person, and if they turned around to me and they were happy, they wouldn't be my friend for too long. You know, I would like them to be a little sad with me. I don't expect them to, you know, be thinking about it for the next week, but there are certain contexts in which it's actually better for us to feel sad than happy, you know. So, you know, I'd prefer to be sad than to be labelled a psychopath. That's what I heard somebody say recently. I was like, that works, I suppose. So happiness is as normal as it is abnormal. It's just different things in different contexts. So what exactly is happiness? A lot of people say, you know, okay, I'm coming here because I just want happiness. I just want to be happy. The thing about happiness is that it's very fleeting. And there are certain things that make us feel happy in the short term that aren't that good for us in the long term. For example, if you got and maxed your credit card, it might feel good going home that day. It might not feel good when you get the bill, especially if there's somebody else involved in the bill that didn't know about the original day, you know. But if we can go to more of a sense of contentment, like that I actually can stand over my life, you know, that what I stand for, I'm not happy in every single moment, but overall my life is where I want to be right now. That's kind of more of what we're going for with this ACT approach. So fairy tales. What do fairy tales and rom-coms, and rom-com stands for romantic comedies, for anyone who doesn't know, tell us about happiness? They lived? Yeah. They actually did this really interesting research where they got women in couples to rate their satisfaction with their male partner before or after watching a romantic comedy. You know what happened, right? What happened, do you think, after the romantic comedy? Were they more or less satisfied with their partners? Significantly less. And do any of us really believe that this is the case? Yet we just can't help comparing. So there are 4 myths that are very widely kind of sold to us through fairy tales, romantic comedies, through the media, I think, a lot of the time. It's very hard to see any media coverage that isn't for mental health, that doesn't have some version of, buy this and you'll be successful, you'll be liked, you'll be happy. Don't buy this, you'll be miserable, you'll be an outcast. It's kind of hard to see that, isn't it? That doesn't have some version of that. So there are 4 myths that can get us into a lot of trouble. Happiness is the natural state of all humans. If that was the case, I don't know why a lot of the research would show that 1 in 3 people have mental health issues at any one time, you know? So happiness is the natural state, as I said, it's in different contexts. If you're not happy, you're defective. The reality is none of us can be happy all of the time. Or you could, but you'd have to be a psychopath. So we've kind of knocked that one off the list. To create a better life, we must get rid of negative feelings. Honestly, who has gotten caught by this one? I have. I'm the only one? Who's not playing the game of raising their hands anymore? Okay. How many people have said, I'll do that when I feel better. I'll do that when I feel up to it. And what happens? The reality is we need to start creating the better life that we want right now, and it's often the feelings kind of carry up. It's actually often that's the very trap that keeps us stuck where we are. And you should be able to control what you think and feel. Who's gotten caught by that one? Yeah. Okay, so as a matter of interest, how many people have thought about a yellow Jeep in the last 2 weeks? No one? You have? Just now. Okay, but before now, no? Okay, so this will be really easy. Don't think about a yellow Jeep right now. Don't think about what it would be like if Frank had a yellow Jeep right over there. Don't think about what it would be like if I had a yellow Jeep here. Don't think about what it would be like if there was a yellow Jeep waiting outside to escort you home when you left here. And just be aware if you're thinking, firstly, this is a stupid exercise, and secondly, I'm not thinking of the yellow Jeep. What are you thinking of? Yellow Jeep. Okay. Now, it's probably not going to do any big difference to any of your lives whether you think about a yellow Jeep or not. But what if you're saying, don't think about depression, don't think about depression, don't think about depression? What are you thinking about? More or less than you were before? More. Thought suppression research shows us that the more we try to control and get rid of thoughts, So what seems like a good strategy, how many people have been told by people, how many people have been given the advice, don't worry about it? Oh, why didn't I think of that? Okay, I'll turn off that switch. If anybody knows of that switch, please let me know. I'm guessing if you knew of that switch, you probably wouldn't have come here, though today you'd be giving your own talk. So that's like around thoughts. And let's say I put somebody up here. Well, we'll use Frank as an example because he's unfortunate enough. Okay, so Frank is here. I just wire him up to all of these things and I say, look, Frank, you're absolutely fine. You have all these wires attached to you as long as you don't get anxious. But if you get anxious, there's going to be a couple of thousand volts go through you. How is Frank going to feel? Yeah. I always think it's really funny when people say, calm down. That's going to really help us, isn't it? Okay. So live your dreams except for that one about being eaten by the giant spider. So often before act, it feels like, and I'm just using the spider, but for some of us it could be depression, for some of us it could be anxiety, for some of us it could be a difficult relationship. And it feels like that's all we can see. And this lovely sunset down here, just you can hardly see it. But this might be a bit better, wouldn't it? The spider is still there, but there's all this life going on around it. Okay, 10 minutes. Wow, this is going to be a quick 10 minutes. You can't get rid of your fears, but you can learn to live with them. So starting to look at our life in terms of workability, becoming more aware of when are we in our head, when are we in our lives. I'm noticing that saying that my mother says, the more hurry, the less speed. And how much of my life is spent trying to get away from the things I don't want versus how much of my life is being spent actively moving towards things that are really important to me. Okay, I love this. Does anybody's friends look like these two guys here? No? Okay. So they did a research study over in the States where they got these two guys who were playing a ball game. And then see that little hand down there? That's meant to be me or you, whoever's playing the game. And what they did was they actually started playing the game. So the three of us are kind of playing this ball game together. And then after 5 minutes, they stop and they just start playing with one another back and forth and they leave me out. They actually had wires, not the ones that send 2,000 volts through you, to measure how people experience this. And what they found was that when people were rejected or left out from this ball game, from these people who do not even look like people we would know, they experienced that pain as the same way as if they were physically hurt, as if somebody came up and actually hit them. Isn't that interesting? I found this has been majorly useful for a lot of people because sometimes we find out that there was a party or an event and we weren't told about it. And we feel really, really bad. And then we feel bad about feeling bad about that. Have you ever had that experience? And for me, this kind of showed this is some way that we're actually hardwired as humans because from an evolutionary perspective, we needed to be included. So actually what we found is that really our brain registers rejection or ostracism as the same as physical pain. Do people find that interesting? Yeah. Okay, so the demons on the boat. I'm gonna skip this because there's a lot that I want to get through in 9 minutes. So diffusion, recognizing our word prisons. Do these words look familiar to people? Have to, shoulds, must, buts, can'ts, won'ts. Perfection. So I'm going to give people a chance maybe to do a little bit of diffusion now. Would you like to kind of get a chance to see how this actually works kind of in action? So what I'm going to do is, because this is about acting mindfully in daily life, I'll invite you to actually maybe just notice a thought that you got hooked by even just since the start of this talk less than an hour ago. You know, maybe I don't get this, there's no point. Just something that kind of showed up in the last hour. Not the most difficult thought that you've ever had, but just something that you'd like to be able to unhook from. Because just like we wouldn't dump somebody in the deep end, it's best that we don't do that with ourselves when we're learning a new skill as well. So would you be willing to try that? Yes. Okay. So if you want to just you'll be pros now, back into mindfulness posture. Legs uncrossed, feet against the ground. Either closing over your eyes or fixing your gaze at a fixed point on the floor or at your knees. And I'm just going to invite you to connect with your breathing for a moment. And as you connect to your breath, see if you can also notice one thought that you've gotten hooked by since the start of this talk. It could be some version of, I don't understand, I bet other people get this better than me, this won't work for me. Just noticing one thought that showed up. And then really buying into that thought, really getting hooked by it. And notice what happens in your body. For about 90% of us, in my experience, will have a strong physical reaction. Maybe in our chest, in our belly. And just noticing in the past, when you got hooked by this thought, did you do the kind of things that help bring you closer towards where you want to be? Or did you do the kind of things that brought you further away? And resting in and knowing that the vast majority of us do the things that bring us further away. And now I'm going to invite you to try out some diffusion strategies. And just being aware, like earlier on with the yellow Jeep, if you're trying to do this to get rid of the thought, you're probably going to be sorely disappointed. So the best way to approach this is with the beginner's mind, with curiosity. So the first strategy is to put the words, I'm having the thought that, before your thought. I'm having the thought that. For example, I'm having the thought that this won't work for me. And now putting the phrase, I'm noticing I'm having the thought that, before your thought. I'm noticing I'm having the thought that, before your thought. For example, I'm noticing I'm having the thought that I don't get this exercise. And now, putting the phrase, I'm aware that I'm noticing that I'm having the thought that, before your thought. I'm aware that I'm noticing that I'm having the thought that. For example, I'm aware that I'm noticing that I'm having the thought that I'll never be able to do diffusion because the sentences are far too long to remember. Okay. So just to briefly check in, did anybody notice that there was a little bit more space between you and the thought as it went by? Could I just get a show of hands just to get an idea? Okay. Did anybody notice that it made no difference or it made you feel worse? Okay. A few people, okay. In a group of around this size, I would imagine that there's probably 15 to 20 people who had the experience that it didn't make any difference or it made them feel worse at the end. I've done this with over 1,000 people now, and no matter what size the group, it generally seems to be 1 in 10 people the first time they do it have that experience. The good news is some of the people who had problems with it at the start got the most out of it in the long run. Often when you have that experience at the start, it's down to one of a couple of things. One is that maybe we pick a thought that's a bit too big to start off with, or the other is that we're doing it trying to get rid of the thought. So we kind of get caught in the yellow Jeep effect. I don't know if that helps the people who had that experience. And if anybody wants to talk to me more about any of the exercises afterwards, I'd be more than happy to go through it. But like any new skill, it usually does take a little bit of time to practice. But it's just that I'm having the thought that, and as I said, I'll have my email up at the end, and you can certainly email me about it afterwards. 4 minutes, okay. I tried to put one whole day's worth of slides into an hour. So I'm gonna skip some of these, but you can contact me about them afterwards and go through them. The power of vulnerability. There's this amazing researcher, Dr. Brené Brown. I don't know if you've seen the Power of Vulnerability video. It's a TED Talk, and it's brilliant. And what she's found through her research is that we can't selectively numb. So what that means is if we try to numb the sadness and we try to numb the anxiety, we also end up numbing joy, numbing connection, numbing curiosity, those kind of things. So it's just about being aware of that, because I think realistically, if we could selectively numb all the stuff we didn't want and just feel the stuff that we wanted to, I think I would do that, selective numbing therapy. It sounds kind of nice, doesn't it? But the reality is it doesn't work out that way. Acceptance, the curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change. So these are just some pieces around developing self-compassion. Now, so I can probably do one more exercise, and I just want to put it out to you guys. I think we can either do an acceptance exercise or we can do a values exercise. So, or we could try and do a little bit both together. Okay, so we've got 3 options. We can do an acceptance exercise, a values exercise, or both. So can I just get a rough show of hands who would like to do just acceptance? Okay, Frank, can you be my adjudicator judge? Right, hands up for acceptance. Okay. Now, hands up for values just on its own. Okay, they're not keen on values. And hands up on acceptance and values together. Okay, I think it's acceptance and values together.
I thought you were allowing me to judge it.
Oh, sorry.
Acceptance and values.
I'm going to have... I did look over at you, Frank, in fairness. Where's Claire? Can I get somebody who's a bit nicer to me next year? Okay, so, right. I'm just going to flick to... The most precious gift we can offer others is our presence. When mindfulness embraces those we love, they will bloom like flowers. Take that hand. One of my favorite ACT teachers. He probably doesn't even know what ACT is, but... Okay. And a lot of what we're doing is about trying to develop this connection sunset mode of mind. Does anybody know how a sunset is the way that it is? Okay. But can you appreciate it? Yeah. Yet how often do we say, I can't, I just need to understand it, you know? So can we give that same sunset mode of mind kind of way of being to ourselves and those we love? So, you see, really, I did try and cover too much. The secret to achieving inner peace lies in understanding our inner core values. Those things in our lives that are most important to us. And then seeing that those things are reflected in the daily events of our lives. I'm paraphrasing because this is on the end of my email. Because I think this is really what it's kind of all about. So I'm going to do a little exercise with you to connect with your values about your 80-year-old you. So if you'd like to get comfortable in a mindfulness posture again, legs uncrossed, feet against the ground, making room for any version of the thought, not another bloody mindfulness exercise. There's at least a few of you. Yeah. And just connecting in with your breathing right now. Noticing how your lungs expand with each in-breath as a new beginning. And contract with each out-breath as a complete letting go. And next I'm going to invite you to take your 2 hands and just to gently rub them against one another and get some heat generated in your hands. And then once you've got some heat generated in your hands, taking your hands and placing one in your heart and one in your belly. And in my opinion, this is one of the best self-compassionate moves that we can show ourselves. So when we feel sad, when we feel anxious, when we feel disappointed, rather than pushing against ourselves, if we can support ourselves exactly as we are. Seeing if you can notice how your hands gently rise and fall with your breathing. And see if you can allow some of that warmth to permeate throughout you. And as you continue to connect with your breathing and continue to keep your hands in these positions, I'm going to invite you to imagine that your 80-year-old self, an older, wiser you, is coming just to give you 3 bits of advice. They've been through all that you have been through and so much more. And they just want to say 3 things to you. The first thing they say is, you know what? You spend far too much time. They're not saying it to point the finger or to blame you, but they're just saying, you know what? You spend far too much time. And about 90% of the people I've done this exercise with, that is, you spend far too much time worrying. The next piece of advice they want to give you is, you spend far too little time. What might your 80-year-old you tell you that you spend far too little time doing? And resting in and knowing right now that the questions are far more important than the answers. I've actually worked with many people who didn't get any answer the first time that they did this, but something showed up a week or a month down the line. And the last piece of advice is, if there was just one thing that you could change from this day forward, this is what I recommend. So just noticing, what one change would your 80-year-old self recommend? And what difference would that make to you and the most important people and areas in your life if you made that change? And we have a saying in ACT that values and vulnerabilities are poured from the same vessel. So if you're making contact with how you would like your life to be different, that also brings up feelings of uncertainty, feelings of anxiety, feelings of regret. And just see if you can allow your 2 hands in those positions just to really be compassionate and kind to whatever is showing up for you right now. Just taking a gentle stretch, or whatever feels right for you, and I will leave you with your comfort zone where the magic happens. And I'm just gonna, okay. This is actually a recent headline of the San Francisco Chronicle. A female humpback whale who had become entangled in a spider web of crab traps and line weighed down by hundreds of pounds of traps that caused her to struggle to stay afloat. She also had hundreds of yards of line rope wrapped around her body, tail, torso, and a line tugging in her mouth. A fisherman spotted her just east of the Farallon Islands and radioed an environmental group for help. Within a few hours, the rescue team arrived and determined that she was so bad off, the only way to save her was to dive in and untangle her. They worked for hours and eventually freed her. When she was free, the divers say, she swam in what seemed like joyous circles. She then came to each and every diver, one at a time, and nudged them, pushed them gently around as if she was thanking them. Some said it was the most incredibly beautiful experience of their lives. The guy who cut the rope out of her mouth said her eyes were following him the whole time, and he will never be the same. So here is my wish for you. May you and all those you love be so blessed and fortunate to be surrounded by people who will help you get untangled from the words and stories that are binding you. And may you always know the joy of giving and receiving gratitude. Thank you.